On today's episode, we're going to have a much needed conversation. And conversation because I do think that sometimes fans of every team can lose the intricacies of something. And sometimes fans get so caught up in comparisons to what other teams do that they don't realize how hard it is to replicate what another team has done. For example, a lot of Bulls fans say, well, let's copy the blueprint of the Thunder. Let's copy the blueprint of the Spurs. Let's copy the blueprint of the Knicks, the Pacers, whatever else it is. I think one thing that you have to look at is that not even all those teams follow the same blueprint. And the blueprint to success and sustained success is not the same for every single team. You can't simply copy the blueprint of another team just because they were successful. So in today's episode, I'm going to talk about why the Chicago Bulls don't need to copy anybody else's blueprint. They need to build their own. We'll talk about that, plus dive into the mailbag right after this. What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get to this content for today, y'all. So I said it at the start of the show. I'm not even going to bury the lead here too much, right? I want to talk about this. This is the main focus of today's episode, right? Is that successful team building is not a recipe. It's not a recipe that you can just go in and duplicate, because fans will often point to the Oklahoma City Thunder, the San Antonio Spurs, right? Indiana, New York, name your team, Houston, right? They'll go to that, and it makes it sound simple, right? They'll say things like accumulate picks, draft young talent, develop players, trade for a star, become a contender. And really, in reality, what it does and what it really ignores is the uncontrollable parts of all of those scenarios. Draft luck, star availability, trade leverage, player development outcomes, market timing, right? Contract value on top of all of that, right? Chicago can copy principles, but it can't copy circumstances. I think sometimes fans really get lost in that, right? You can copy a principle, which is let's draft well, let's develop, let's do those things. You can't copy another franchise's luck. You can't copy another franchise's trade leverage. You can't copy another franchise draft position or player development outcome, right? And I think when you look at this, so I want to look at each of those teams, the teams that are most oftenly talked about from the Chicago Bulls, and talked about how and why the Chicago Bulls can't do that, right? And I'm going to talk also about what they can pull away from those teams, but what's hard to replicate from those teams. Number one, when you look at the OKC Thunder, they started from a position that Chicago is not currently occupying, and if we're talking about in reality, they have never occupied within the last 15 years. They just have never been there. The Thunder traded Paul George and Russell Westbrook for massive trade returns, in that they landed Shai Gilgeous-Alexander before he became an MVP level player. And at the time, when people kind of looked at Shai as, promising guard, right? But not what he turned into, not turning into the best scoring guard opposite of Jordan since Michael Jordan played basketball. They didn't. They did draft. They developed well, right? And so when you look at what the Chicago Bulls can borrow from the Oklahoma City Thunder, because again, I do think in fairness in having this conversation, I do have to talk about the things and the principles that they can pull away from it. The asset discipline, the patience that the Oklahoma City Thunder played, identifying, talent in regards to that one. They identified really good talent in the draft. They developed that talent. And then if you even look at what they've done over the last couple of years, right, when it's not just about drafting talent, even though I'd say getting a Damara and getting Thomas Sorber were really good draft picks as well, right, is that they have identified when to move on from players at the right time and how to either get assets back for those guys in the case of like Jared McCain, right? Or it's time to move on and not pay the absorbent contracts that are going to come, right? I think that what the Thunder also did is they avoided premature win now moves. They developed to a point where they got to a point with this team, and then they once they got to a winning point with the young players that they developed, then they started making some of those win now moves. Getting Isaiah Hartenstein, trading for Alex Caruso, right? Those type of things. So when you talk about what the Bulls can't copy from the Oklahoma City Thunder, it's simple. They don't have a Paul George level talent. They don't have a Shai Gilgeous, or they don't have a Russell Westbrook level talent of when they traded him. And you're not going to luck into usually getting a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in return from that, right? And I think also something that the Thunder didn't do is they didn't assume that picks were going to be stars. And that's something that you can't do as a fan either. The Thunder blueprint is not something that you can simply lose games and collect picks. You can't simply trade players and collect picks. They traded players that were at basically the height of their power and built a massive stock of draft picks that they're still benefiting from right now. But you can't take away, like I said, some of the other things. Being disciplined with your assets, having patience when you do that, identifying talent. Those are the things you can take away from it. But this model of let's do what OKC Thunder did and stack draft picks, that's very hard from the place that the Chicago Bulls are in versus where the Oklahoma City Thunder were in. Let's take a look at the Spurs, right? I'm calling the Spurs the generational model in all of this. When you look at it, their path to this begins with something that nobody can manufacture. It begins with getting Victor Wembanyama, right? That's what it gets you. Now, yes, they had some players before them that are still on the roster, make no mistake about it, but what got them to where they are right now is getting to draft a star and a generational talent that is already at 22 years old has lived up to so much of the hype already, right? And I think when you talk about it, when you draft somebody that turns into a star, that changes every building decision that you make. To put that in terms of the Bulls, let's say that Caleb Wilson not only looks like the best player to come out of this draft, but let's say Caleb Wilson eventually starts looking like somebody who by year 2, year 3, looks like he's going to be a star in this league, not just a really good player, then maybe you can replicate some of that, right? But I think when you look at it, most of the roster that the San Antonio Spurs have, they also developed internally. Then later on, they went and made a draft pick for De'Aaron Fox, right? After the foundation was already clear and set, right? So when you talk about what Chicago can borrow from the San Antonio Spurs, the standards of development, the long-term thinking in regards to that one, define responsibilities for your young players early on so you can grow them together and develop them correctly, and then waiting until you have your centralized player and make that clear, and then you make moves built around to supplement that, right? What I think you can't copy from the San Antonio Spurs is drafting a generational prospect that's an absolute phenom and a true unicorn. You can't just go out and replicate that. I wish that you could. I wish there's something that you can just say, let's manufacture this and we're all good. But in the reality of it, you just can't. And that's a problem from that, right? So I think those are the things that you can copy from that. And the things that you can is cool. Do not treat Caleb Wilson like he has to become Wemby for this rebuild to work. Let's not treat it like that. If he becomes that, great. But let's not go into this treating it like that's what he has to become for us to have a clear rebuild. It makes it easier, but it doesn't, it's not something that you can clearly just replicate easily. Let's look at the New York Knicks, right? The star identification and consolidating assets to go after things. The Knicks got aggressive after finding their engine. And I remember when I talked about the New York Knicks a couple of, maybe it was a year or two ago. I think it was maybe the year they got Jalen Brunson. And I remember somebody was like, well, why are we talking about the Knicks like there's somebody that have done anything? They haven't accomplished anything. I'm like, look at what they've done. They built a steady assets. They had young players, and then they weren't afraid to move off that. Once they went out and got Jalen Brunson, they saw Jalen Brunson is going to be like that, right? They signed Jalen Brunson before he became a franchise-level star. They took a shot on somebody. And you know what Bulls fans would have said? If the Bulls were the ones to give Jalen Brunson that contract that the New York Knicks did, why are we giving somebody who was second fiddle to Luka Doncic? That's what the Bulls fans would have said, right? And then once Jalen Brunson proved that he can lead the offense and lead the team, New York Knicks started consolidating their prospects, started consolidating their draft picks, and they started being aggressive in it. They added Josh Hart. They added OG Anunoby. They added Mikal Bridges. They went out and got Karl Anthony Towns. And look at how it now resulted to them. They are the reigning champions in the NBA because of that. So what can the Bulls borrow from the New York Knicks? Identifying talent before the market does. That's a huge aspect of this. So when we're talking about things like me bringing up Bryce Sensabaugh, I'm not saying that he's going to be a Jalen Brunson level. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that in doing something and going out and identifying talent that you may look at and say, yeah, they're cool, but what are they going to identify people that you really do think with a increased role, increased responsibility, and a better team build, that they're going to be able to blossom into actual talent. Right now, it doesn't you got lucky with it being star talent, right? And then I say this, use your mid-size contracts as trade tools. That's one thing that the New York Knicks have done extremely well over this build, is they've used their mid-size contracts and they turn that into actual weaponry for themselves. And once you do identify that you have that centerpiece, that's where you get aggressive. That's when things are clear. That's something similar that you can see from all the teams that we've talked about in a way, right? What you cannot copy from the New York Knicks is trading multiple first round picks before you know who your engine is. There are a lot of Bulls fans that say things like, oh, it's whatever it costs, go out and get this guy. But yeah, if you do that before you really recognize what you have here as far as the foundation and the engine, that's where you get left with traded assets, and you're probably going to be, maybe you even get to the second round of the playoffs consistently. Maybe you can convince yourself that you're close to winning an Eastern Conference Finals. But if you really want to build a true contender, it takes a little bit more than that, right? I think in this case, you do not want to assume that Modest, Giddey, and Caleb are already Brunson-level prospects. They have to work to get there. Last offseason, I got a little bit of flack for some Bulls fans when I often said I think Bulls fans are developing a habit of seeing Modest as who he could be, but thinking he's that right now, right? And I do think last season, some people kind of came more down to earth in regards to that. Now that Caleb Wilson's here, people are surprisingly doing the opposite thing, kind of turning on Modest Buzelis a little bit. But the Knicks didn't trade everything and then just discover the identity. They discovered Brunson, and then they built an identity around him as him as being their offensive engine, and look where it got. Then let's go at Indiana. Indiana's the one that I'm really excited to talk about here, not only because we know that AK said things like replicate, find our Pascal. That's not what I'm talking about here. But when you look at the Indiana Pacers, what they did in building the roster that they have, and I do think as long as Tyrese Haliburton is going to be fully healthy and back to himself, that's going to be a dangerous team in the Eastern Conference next season. But they didn't bottom out for years. And I think people forget that part, right? For so many Bulls fans to say, let's just tank for a couple of years and bottom out. They didn't. And now with the regulation zone, you want to stay out the bottom three. They traded Domantas Sabonis for Tyrese Haliburton. Tyrese Haliburton then ended up blossoming into a star. Then they reset their franchise around pace, passing, quick decisions, and built a play style that people worked into. Then they kept useful veterans and then later added Pascal Siakam to that. Not to mention the players that they did develop over that time in Nesmith and Nembhard and those type of guys, right? And I think when you look at what Chicago can take from the Indiana Pacers, if they want to take anything, build around a style. Once you start having a style of play that's worked, that's successful, and that fits your roster, which some could say that maybe the Bulls do have that with Giddey, Modest, Caleb, Nick Claxton, and finding the same style of center, but maybe a different guy, right? Is that build around a play style and then get guys that fit that play style and that can play together really well. That goes a long way into building a team, right? Give undervalued players a real serious role and then see what they can turn into. And maybe we already started that with Josh Giddey, even though some Bulls fans still kind of undervalue Josh Giddey, right? Then keep useful veterans around during the development phases. Again, I'm going to say that again for the people that are a little slow, didn't hear me in the back. Keep useful veterans around during the youth development phase. Far too often, there are far too many Bulls fans that want to say, let's trade every vet. Why do we have this vet on the team? Let's get all young guys. That's not the way that almost any of these teams did it to certain degrees, right? You want to be able to have key veterans around that support the growth and development of your young players. When you do that, that's when you can take it a bit further. That's when you're really building a culture of development and those type of things, right? Also, trade for a star who complements your engine once you discover your engine. Now, we'll see if the Bulls end up doing that. If your engine becomes Caleb, if it becomes Modest, if it becomes a mixture of Caleb, Modest, and Josh Giddey, whatever your engine ends up being, find stars that then fit around those guys if they're available, and if you have an opportunity to flip a player that another team values maybe more than what that current build needs that's on your team, and then you get a star back. That's how you build those type of things. I also think the things that you cannot copy from the Indiana Pacers is, one, you can't assume another team is going to hand over the next Tyrese Haliburton to you. Just because they got Tyrese Haliburton through a trade, it doesn't mean that you're going to find whatever your version. I'm not saying we need somebody that plays like Tyrese Haliburton. I'm just saying our version of Haliburton. It doesn't mean that we're going to necessarily find that guy through a trade. It's about finding that guy. You're not necessarily going to find him the same exact way. Stay competitive without finding your engine. How do you stay competitive? Because that's how you develop, is when you're able to stay competitive. The Pacers didn't follow the modern rebuilding blueprint that so many Bulls fans wanted to see this team take on and follow for so long. That's not what they did. They made a franchise-altering trade. They identified offensive talent early and offensive identity. They had a coach that also established that, and then they built every decision that they had around that decision that they ultimately made. That's what they do. So when you look at what these teams do have in common, right? Each team identified organizational talent. OKC, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. San Antonio, Wemby. New York, Brunson. Pacers, Haliburton, right? And then each one decided to build around fit, not just talent rankings, not just going after the biggest name. How do you get players that fit in regards to that one? And then they became more progressively aggressive once that culture and that fit was set in. That's what the Bulls need to do here, right? They pushed in their chips when the core was already invested and developed. That's the real lesson for Chicago in this. Not to do what some Bulls fans want to do and just going all in now or finding a star, trading all that now. It takes time. And this is where the Chicago Bulls get to. We get back to this. The Bulls are still in the discovery phase of all of this, right? The Bulls have young talent. We have useful veterans, but we have no proven top 15 player yet, right? Now, the questions that you have in regards to this, the core questions, can Josh Giddey be the engine of your offense, of a winning team? Why are you winning games? Can Modest Buzelis become a top 2 or 3 option on a winning team? Does Caleb Wilson become a true star-level two-way player, right? And then, can Caleb and Modest function together? Can they grow together, right? Who's your long-term center option? How do you find that in regards to it? Then your young players between Dalen Swain, Noah Essengate. Can any of those guys develop into meaningful role players for you? Let's throw Leonard Miller in regards to that one too. You cannot skip the evolution stage. Now, the evolution stage lasts a little bit different for each team, each franchise, right? But I think when you look at this, there are a few pillars to this. Pillar one, make development competitive. Be competitive through your development process. 2, build around your actual advantages that you have in his team. We have positional size. We have transition play. We have rebound and go players. We have all that type of stuff. Front court athleticism. That's where you should get. Identifying that play style. Play fast, play hard, do those type of things. Number 3, let the core reveal itself. Don't try to force a core. That's what AK did. He tried to force a core and force a franchise player in Zach LaVine. It never worked out. Do not force that. Let the core reveal itself. And once it does reveal itself, that's when your build gets so much easier. Number 4, use your veterans as pillars to help build up your young players. The goal of veterans on a young developing team is to have veterans that support the development of those young players. In a way, they're scaffolding. If you're talking about building something up, that's their job here, to be here for the Chicago Bulls. And number 5, do not predetermine your big move. Do not do that. Do not try to predetermine your big move. Let the big move come naturally over time through the work and evaluation that you have done. Let it establish itself. Don't try to force it. And I think when you look at this, like it's a simple identity or blueprint for the Bulls right now. Find your identity. Define who your best players are. Separate who is players that you build with, the players that you build around, right? Then consolidate those players that you don't want to keep. Move those players on. Try to find pieces that fit a little bit better. No matter if they're young or whatever, if they don't fit, move on from them. Take some time, though, but move on from them. And then sustain. Sustain what you have once you have developed that. Sustain what you have. Work to keep it, because that's what's going to take you further in the next step. That's it. It's not about copying another team's blueprint. It's about finding your own blueprint. And let's hope that Bryson Graham is on his way to do that, because if you want something sustainable and winning to stay here in Chicago for a decade plus, this is what you have to do, and that's how it's done. Not trying to just copy what another team did one for one. Take your time, let it build, and let's see what it's going to turn into. With that said, let's get into the voicemails that we have for today, man. This one's from Vikram.
So, Haize, Vikram. So I saw this quick report on Polymarket on Twitter that said that Sam Presti tricked the Nuggets into being the only second team in the second apron by making Denver match the offer sheet on Spencer Jones. Yeah, so this is interesting. I just wanted to say, like, I feel like that actually makes the Bulls either contenders for Payne Watson, or they should become huge, like what is it? They should become interested in taking on Christian Braun's contract. And I say this just because, like, if they sign and trade Payne Watson, they could get they could get Payne Watson without sending out any salary or players. Yeah, I mean, players are like picks or anything, so we could get Payne Watson basically for free without doing much. Or if the Nuggets are desperate to keep Payne Watson, like, we could take on Christian Braun's contract, and now the Nuggets are forced to give us a pick or something. And I think Bryson Graham needs to be all over this kind of thing because Payne Watson is very important to their future. And the future makeup of this team. Christian Braun has had a terrible year into what his contract is going to be, so his value's down the drain. And they're a second apron team now. That's not where the Denver Nuggets want to be at all. And I don't know if Bryson Graham can pull off some sort of trade to receive pick compensation. I know a lot of teams don't want to do that right now, but Denver's going to get very desperate at this point, and I don't even know if they can trade a pick right now, but it might be pick swaps or something, which in all honesty that doesn't do anything for me. If they can figure out a way to give up some draft compensation to the Bulls, or figure out a way to give up draft compensation, I'm very excited to see how that would work. I hope Bryson Graham is on it. If he's not, then I don't know. I feel like the whole rhetoric of he wanted to take on bad money for picks, where is that, So I'm looking forward to see what he does with this Denver situation. I hope he can take advantage, and yeah, just let me know what you think, I guess.
The Bulls really don't have cap space anymore, Vikram. I think you're forgetting that the Bulls only have their $9 million non-tax player mid-level exception. So, no, we can't take on Peyton Watson's contract without sending anything back. We can't absorb Christian Braun's contract without taking something back either. We don't have that cap space anymore. We had to rescind our trade exceptions to operate as an under-the-cap team, so we don't even have that anymore. So I think that you kind of miss those things. And, again, I'm not trying to talk shit about you for that. The cap is a lot of things to remember, a lot of moving parts, but I just think you got to remember that the Bulls aren't in a position to try to put a huge offer sheet out on Peyton Watson. They're not really in a position to sign and trade for Peyton Watson, either absorb Christian Braun's contract to help Denver keep him. That ship has sailed. That's over with. It's done with. And now we sit in a place now where hey, I think pretty much what our roster is what we're going to be. But we're going to see. All right, let's get into this next voicemail, man. This one's from Vaughn.
What's good, Haize? This is Vaughn, man. Again, me and you, we go back and forth, but man, I love your content, straight up. You're a big reason that I've been reinvigorated on the Bulls. Even before getting the 4th overall pick and AK getting fired, you got me back in, man, just with your content. So I appreciate you, man. And, I'm here to be an asshole at times, but that's, you know how it is. But anyway, man, the Ben Mathurin thing, dude, I'm kind of stoked about that. I hope there is some, legs behind that rumor. Obviously living in Indianapolis, Indianapolis, one of your commenters said I left out the D last time. So Indianapolis, living here, I watch the Pacers, not because I like them, just because they're on all the time. And Mathurin has that dog, man. He's got some go. If you catch some of his bad games, yeah, I can see why you would not want him. But I'm trying to tell, your listeners that, when it comes to untapped potential, and I didn't even know his numbers were that great last year, but they weren't bad at all. 16-5 among, between the two teams. And again, as somebody who watches him, he has a rugged style of play. The fact that you told me he shot 37% from three was encouraging, but he gets to the line. He would give us another guy in the half court that could get his own shot. And again, he gets to the line a lot. I think he can become a better defender because he's long. Like I said, he's not super athletic, like Anthony Edwards, but he's not a stiff either. So I'm excited about, the possibility of Mathurin, particularly if we could get rid of him, or get him for a Coro and 2 second-round picks, 2 or 3. I really don't care, but I'm not, heck, we had a Coro starting last year. I'm not even really thrilled with him being a backup guard because he just can't really score. So I would love that swap if possible. As far as the other guards that Schuster mentioned, as far as a trade, I'm with you 100% on Sensabaugh. When he lit us up for 43, he won me over as a fan when he did that. But again, I'm very intrigued by the Mathurin stuff. I hope that there's some legitimacy behind that. And, I just want to finish on, Graham has really positioned this team nicely. With his contracts. Very tradable contracts, very reasonable outside of P. Will. And then with the team options coming up, it looks like the Bulls will have a lot of financial flexibility to maybe make a run at Duren or, Peyton Watson or even absorb someone in a trade. So keep up the great work, Haize.
Ben Mathurin is definitely a solid bench player, right? And I think people will miss that. Like when you can average 17 points off a bench, when somebody can give you 15 to 17 points off the bench, that's well worth it as long as the contract is right. That's what all this comes down with. I was over a whole lot of bull with my brother Troy. It all has to come down to the contract value. If the contract value is there, then you can make some things work. If the contract balloons up, like somebody said, like do a sign and trade for Patrick Williams and Ben Mathurin, like at that point, Ben Mathurin's contract would have to be almost $21 million. That's way too much value for somebody. Even that has shown some promise that is a bench scorer, right? Now, there's some hope that maybe Ben Mathurin can turn into more than just a bench scorer and turn into maybe a starter for you long term. But just right now, the place that I would like to be in, 10 to 15 million. That's what I'd be willing to pay for Ben Mathurin personally. I know there are going to be some people that disagree with that. That's fine. But that's kind of where I'd like to stay in. But yeah, Ben Mathurin does have upside, whether people want to believe it or not. All right, let's get into the last voicemail for today, man. This one's from Doug.
Hey, Haize, this is Doug. I got a fun what-if type question for you. Where do you think the Bulls would be if we would have got the front office and coaching staff change a year earlier instead of giving the previous ones extensions? Would we have traded away all the expiring contracts like we did? Do you think we'd still be in the middle, like playoff or play-in team? And do you think we would have got Portland's pitch without Thiago Splitter there to coach him? I know it doesn't really matter. Just curious of what you thought. Keep up the good work. God bless.
Here's the thing. I don't really like doing content based off the past. Like I'll do like probability things going forward, but I don't really ever like to look back and be like, well, what if this? Like I'll say this though, right? To pay respect to your question is that I do think Bryson Graham's evaluation of players would have been a little bit different. I think that he would have evaluated, for example, Ayo Dosunmu differently than AK did because of the way that the type of players that Bryson Graham likes to have. I think that Ayo would have been evaluated differently, but I don't know whether that different evaluation would have led the Chicago Bulls. I think at the point where we were at the deadline, the value was the value for these players. And I don't think you would have gotten a lot more value back, even if your evaluation for them was different. So, that's what I think plays a part into this. But I think the flexibility would have been something that Bryson Graham valued anyway, too. So you might have ended up in pretty much a lot of the same spot. But I guess we'll see. But that's going to do it for today, y'all. I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you to all the voicemail callers as well. I'll tell you guys how to leave voicemail if you want to as well. Make sure you guys sound off in that comment section about all the topics. What do you think about the whole copying another team's blueprint? How do you think about how I laid it out here? Let me know that down below. Make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode or an upload. You can follow us at Bull Central Pod on every social media platform. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. bullcentralpod@gmail.com. And lastly, if you want to leave a text message and or voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the #1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that is thanks to you, lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you right if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation